Okay, so in this video we're going to walk through the pig's vascular system in this really nicely done opened and dissected pig, a nicely perfused pig that from Professor Meyer's class. Alright, so it appears, because you've got a lot of extravascular here, and we don't want to have you lost in that. So we're gonna pick out what I think, and I'm gonna try to call subclavians, and especially in this. I mean, the jugulars and the carotids are pretty straightforward, but tracing from branches, I'm going to use that as my basis of discovery. And so if I look at the arterial tree, so taking blood away from the heart, of course the most prominent vessel is that pulmonary artery, which is always the most anterior or ventral on a pig vessel, and leaving from that right ventricle. Okay, the pulmonary artery actually joins the aorta in the fetal circulation. So here's the joining of this right here, called the ductus arteriosus. All right. So otherwise, the pulmonary artery does continue to deliver blood to the lungs, and these, if you didn't realize, are the lungs in the pig surrounding the heart. Okay, but some of the blood from the right side of the heart is actually diverted into the systemic by this little tube. This will go away and become the ligamentum arteriosum after this pig is born and begins to mature. So, and it's the same for you guys as well. So, behind, as always, the pulmonary artery is the aorta. So, aorta is coming out of the left side of the heart, so it emerges back here, and we can follow this along, right, as it goes down and becomes a descending thoracic aorta. And of course, once it goes beneath the diaphragm down here in the latter part of this field, it will become the descending abdominal aorta. All right, and there's just a blood vessel, a venous blood vessel, moving and delivering. This might be part of what we call the azygous system that delivers to the costals and the muscle of the rib cage. So, from this aorta, right, which we see here, are only two branches in the quadrupeds. There's a brachiocephalic branch right here, the first branch, and the second branch is the left subclavian. So there's not an additional left carotid branch. That's actually going to come off of the brachiocephalic artery. All right, so we move up here, tracing that left subclavian, and it appears to be this vessel going into the arm. So this is still part of the left subclavian, right, moving into that upper limb, if you will, or forelimb of the pig. All right, so it looks like it came from here, moved under the vessel, the venous, and is moving along here. Okay, the other branch off the aorta, part of the arterial tree, the brachiocephalic, is actually going to continue underneath these vessels. I don't want to move them, overstretch them, and break them, but continues underneath these, right, and branches. And it appears to give rise, about right here, to a right subclavian. I believe that's the right subclavian. If I move the venous and the nerves aside, that this vessel is probably the right subclavian. Okay, and it probably branched right somewhere in here. Okay, and then continued on, right subclavian. Okay, and of course there's the right common carotid, which is going to run right next to the trachea that branched off of that. And here's the left common carotid that came from that as well. So we have the 1, 2, 3 branches from this brachiocephalic. And this would have happened right under here. Okay? And I didn't ask students to know any more than that for their, they didn't need to go into the limbs to see. So if we look at the venous, again, focusing just on the thoracic cavity. The venous, of course, we drain the head. So what you probably got here is you probably have an internal and an external jugular running side by side. That would be my guess. I'd have to trace them up here, but I think these are probably internal and external jugulars. For all intents and purposes, again, just judge if it's closer, it's deeper in the body cavity, it's probably an internal. All right. But these would be the jugulars collectively, right? Internal, external, left, internal, external. All right, and then the subclavian would most likely be this vessel right here. So this would be the right subclavian vein, and I'm going to guess that that is the left subclavian vein. All right, so again, you have a lower branch as well, but I don't think that's it. I think it's this upper one. But again, since we want you to know nothing but the subclavians, if we put a pin in either one of theirs, right, you're going to say subclavian because that's, right, we're not asking for any other vessel. But that appears to be the right subclavian, okay, and the left subclavian, again, running with the left subclavian artery. So on each side, the head and arm, or forelimb for these guys, will converge into a brachiocephalic. So the brachiocephalic right side is probably between my fingers here. So here's the jugulars and the subclavian coming together here, and so that should be the right brachiocephalic vein, and then converging here, right? On the left side, we should see the jugulars here coming together, and the subclavian, again, subclavian coming in. Sorry, there's connective tissue. Subclavian coming in. So the left brachiocephalic would really be right there between my probe and finger as they converge. And of course, the right and left brachiocephalics join to form that superior vena cava. All right? So, and then staying within the thoracic cavity, we can of course see the inferior vena cava. Right? If we move the heart aside now, it's very evident that those two vessels come into the right atrium. Hopefully you can see, again, that inferior vena cava coming up. Okay? So that would be your thoracic cavity and the vessels we'd expect you guys to know. And if you get really lost, like I said, just start with the heart and, kind of try to piece together where things are going to. All right? And then we'll quickly run you through. Just pull this connective tissue out. Okay? And I think I'll take some still photos of this as well, because this is a really good pig. And just pull out some of the connective tissue that's, again, in our way. And we'll go beneath the diaphragm now. So I'm gonna turn the pig around. Don't be alarmed. You need to blink for just a minute. Turn the pig around. Right? And when we take a look at the lower half of the organism, the abdominal pelvic cavity. So again, here now in my hands, this is the diaphragm. This is liver, right? So here, let me get the liver here. Huge liver. Gallbladder is always detectable because it's actually kind of greenish here, but it's always a different consistency under here, and we'll get to those. But let's move the stomach a little bit aside, and let me see if I can zoom in just a bit. Hold up. That's a little too far. There, about there. Okay. So now, if I move aside all the viscera to kind of get it oriented here, and it's a challenge at first, right, to get your bearings. So you always find something that you really know consistently. So we've got some kidneys here that, all right, flap of skin, stay out of the way. All right. Okay. So we're going to kind of keep this out of the way. And so what we see, again, a pretty good perfusion in the abdominal pelvic cavity. A little bit of a mess here, but the inferior vena cava is still real evident, right? And running next to it really nicely is the descending aorta, right? So it's coming down, and they will run together right along here. And we could probably take Kleenex or something and kind of, oh, there we go. I'm going to brush that aside, some of that connective tissue, right? And then there's all kinds of nerves and things. So I don't require students to know in the viscera because we want to keep all that intact for when we study digestive. But I can certainly pick out the right renal vein and the left renal vein over here. I can see them moving into the kidneys, and I don't want to destroy the intestine, so I'm kind of pushing that aside. All right. So left renal vein, right renal vein. All right. And so the arteries tend to be deeper again. That's a protective feature. So I kind of have to push this aside, and their perfusion wasn't really, really good, but it looks to me like that is, in fact, the right. It looks like it's coming off this descending abdominal aorta, which we know it should. So that should be the, again, the left renal artery, left renal vein. Right renal artery, right renal vein, right? And the right renal artery, I cannot see right now. I'd have to kind of move this around, so probably not going to be on your test. All right, so here, following the branch, the straight tubes right here, so our inferior vena cava going down, our descending abdominal aorta coming down, they then branch. Okay, so in the pig, we have another discrepancy here, just like we did with branches on the aorta. So here as we're going into the lower limbs or legs, we have a branch here, and then a little continuation on. So technically this is the right external iliac artery, and this is the left external iliac artery. And then these would be the internals. So they actually look different, right? So here's a left internal, sorry, I'll try to get that. A left internal and a right internal. So very nice here, but they separate off like this, all right? The venous, and when you don't need to trace these into the legs, so that's pretty much good enough. And then in the venous, right, when we try to pull up the abdominal aorta and kind of separate them from each other with all this connective tissue, in the venous, this is the one time where the veins kind of move behind the arteries, which is not typical, but they do this in cats and probably in humans as well, right? So underneath these iliac arteries, you can see the vein just kind of peeking through here. So there's an iliac vein, and the iliac vein, from what I understand, the iliac veins, there's a right one, okay, right there, and there's a left one back behind here. They will go down a little bit further and then divide. So these would be technically the common, I believe the common right iliac vein, common left iliac vein. All right? And then, like I said, there's other vessels that branch like you do up here, but we want to keep all the viscera intact. We want the intestines here, here's small intestines, large intestines. So we're not going to bother to try to get that named for you guys. I hope to some degree, we'll zoom out to get a big picture. Okay. I hope to some degree this helps and doesn't confuse you. Again, this is a really good pig, probably a pig that'll be used on the practical. I'll take some stills, and good luck.